Good morning, everyone. I'm thinking this mic works, so I'll put this one down. Hello, hello. I hope you are all doing well and happy to be here at this global forum. I am, again, to be sitting among many of you who have made an impact in education. And today, I'm also excited to be sharing with you an approach that has actually worked very well in terms of what we faced globally with COVID. And I'm thinking, is this it for me to change this? Yes? The slides? Maybe. Sorry. Do you have the little clicker for this? And then we can go ahead. Oh, perfect. Okay, so for starters, who am I? My name is Mahjooba Bianchi. I have actually been in education for over 20 years. My first experience of teaching a class was in Kabul, Afghanistan, at the women's ministry to a group of women who were looking to gain contracts through the World Bank. And at the young age of 23, I stood in front of these women and I taught them how to write proposals. It was a short 2-day training class, but that's when really my passion for education and for sharing my knowledge all started. My credentials, I have a bachelor's in government and international relations, an MBA in IT project management, and several other certifications. Really, the focus of 3T Institute, the name itself is all about using various approaches, integrating them so that individuals find success, regardless of their age, their ability to learn, or where they come from. As an immigrant myself, I have gone through 4 different schooling systems and have had to learn a language in each country that I went to. So it wasn't that I didn't know, it's just that my teachers had to just work with me in a different way to help me learn. So 3T Institute was established in about 2 years ago, before COVID actually. We are a post-secondary vocational school certified by the state of Virginia to operate as such. We also work with local workforce initiatives. The Virginia workforce, for example, that comes through the Department of Labor. And this allows us to really work at the roots of our community, helping those that need education the most. We focus on, like I said, blended learning for career professionals mostly. What I realized as a career professional myself is that as adults, we want to learn, but we just don't have the time. Or there are other obligations like family and children that kind of come in the way of all of that. And so 3T Institute stands as a pillar there to help professionals gain key certifications and find success in their careers. Our courses are in project management, cybersecurity, agile. Anyone that is in the world of project management and IT would be familiar with these certifications. And we're proud to say that right now, our student body is actually pretty global. From Saudi Arabia to Ghana, Pakistan to Canada, we're really serving individuals at every part of the world. But we know that when COVID happened, right, we all had to put on our masks, but we also had to put down a few of our masks in terms of what we understood of education to be. Our children were going to school 4 days or 5 days a week. There was really not a lot of talk about online learning or really another approach. And we were really forced to find a different way to learn. And we did, didn't we? And we came out successful because the entire United States schooling system ended up going online and we managed. And my 3 kids managed as well. So with COVID, it did force us to recognize that there is an additional approach that we can use. So what is blended learning? Blended learning is a means of using various methods to deliver the learning objective, whatever that learning objective may be. It is very important that that methodology be fluid so that you can transition from one method to another, meaning whatever system it is or group, whatever the approach is, it should not be a roadblock. When we are looking to implement blended learning, it is also important to consider the learner themselves, because a lot of times, depending on the age and the ability of the learner, some of the methods may have to be switched or changed. So as much as blended learning does work, you also have to make sure that you customize it based on your demographics and who you're working with. Thank you. You know, blended learning has been around. And if we really look back, it goes to 1840s. Can you believe that? So in the 1840s, we had Sir Isaac Pitman, who launched its first blended learning. And it was how to write shorthand letters. He would write letters to his students, they would respond back, and there was this continuous feedback each time Sir Pitman or Isaac Pitman received a letter. So it has been around for a little while. And then we move further into our timeline, looking into the 60s and 70s. That's when those big computers came into play. And also the start of computer training that we see so much of today. Later on in the 80s, we saw, if we look at our timeline here, little delay. Thank you. In the 70s and 80s, we had TV-based technology supporting live training. This was actually revolutionary in education because you had maybe an instructor or a professor in a particular state, and you couldn't find that same instructor in a different state. Well, guess what? You could televise them live and provide that information. So again, there was that dynamic that definitely changed and made things better for us. Moving further on into 90s, late 80s and 90s, we saw CD-ROMs. Who remembers those floppy disks? Me, right? There we go. Those famous floppy disks. And the learning management system. So we know that it changed how we learned, and there was a transition that almost happened. And now headed into late 1990s, what did we see? The www. Era of education, everything's web-based. And that's still true today in the last timeline on, or the last bullet on our timeline here, is that now what we're really seeing is an approach. We're truly utilizing every method that has been used over the years today. We use writing, we have computer-based learning, we have LMS, we do live training on TV. We're really utilizing all methodologies to deliver education. What I say is that successful blended learning must consider the psychology of the learner and the tools utilized to teach. So there has to be that balance for sure. That we all must consider before we implement a process. The good thing about blended learning is that it's customizable. You can choose a platform, you can choose how you want this platform to look, you can give it access during certain hours, time zones, or you can just leave it, open. So it's very customizable, not only in terms of the method, but also to the individual that is learning. So if you have someone who is an adult learner who requires learning at their own pace, well, guess what? You can make that happen with blended learning, depending on the type of system that you utilize. The other good thing about blended learning is that there's competency-based learning. That means that, which I absolutely love as an educator, is that as your students go through a set of lessons or modules, guess what? You can pause, get their reflection, get their understanding, and if they need a little bit more support, you help them. And if they don't, they can move on to the rest of their lessons. And that's what I love about this. that this competency-based learning allows us to not leave anyone behind. Anytime, anywhere learning. With the World Wide Web or the internet, today we can learn from our cell phones. I instruct my students to download the class app and to learn from home while sitting on their sofas. And so this is amazing, right? You're not just sitting in a classroom. There has to be flexibility with blended learning. If we look at this diagram right here, the purpose behind it is to really show that from a learner's perspective, the misunderstanding is let's give one or two approaches, and I think the student or the learner must understand the concept. But what I have learned over years of implementing these processes is that you just never know which student picks up what lessons or the objective of the lessons based on this diagram. You can have the intervention when you have the instructor or the coach who is teaching a lesson. You have breakout rooms where then it's very individualized. Again, that student is getting what they need. You have a social area for your students to discuss what they just learned. How amazing is it when we can sit with our peers and say, wow, I just learned something. Did you get the same thing? Do we have the same understanding here? So you have that social area, a science lab. And science lab can really be anything. It can be where you're doing exercises together. Breakout rooms, larger or smaller ones, really depends on the size of your classroom. A place of collaboration, maybe guided collaboration, right? A set of standards of how to collaborate, some targeted questions that you can provide. But then in the middle, what we're seeing is the study in collaborative space. Then you come back together, and that synergy, that energy in that room is now full of individuals who are either going to ask you a lot of questions or they're going to give you a lot of feedback. And as instructors, who doesn't want that? We want a classroom full of individuals who are asking us the why, how. And that's what this right here provides you in terms of blended learning. Does every single aspect of this, do you have to implement it? Absolutely not. I think it's important to look at your environment, the age of your students, implement what works. You can start small and then bring in pieces as you go along. As part of blended learning, a word that I always use is active learning. Active learning to me means that, does not mean running around with our books. But what it does mean is that the student wants to be involved with the curriculum, wants to learn. What our biggest challenge in education is that we cannot get individuals to want to learn. So how do we get them to learn? And it is truly through active learning of keeping them engaged in these collaboration rooms, in these breakout rooms, in these different approaches of saying, pause and reflect, did you really learn what you needed to? And get them to want to learn. And that's active learning to me. Here I have created sort of a roadmap. So if anyone's really looking about how do I get started with this blended learning, the world has changed. Students want to do some in class and some out of class at home learning, or you're looking at your work and the environment has changed. So the next few slides are going to help you really understand the pillars of blended learning that you can utilize today and get started with it. So the 5 pillars, sorry, one slide back, are you have to have structured learning. Your learning needs to be in a very structured either platform or methodology, whatever it is that you're using, but there has to be structure. That structure needs to come with a roadmap, a GPS, right? We all have those on our cell phones. Our students need GPSs as well. There needs to be an aspect of accountability, a community, and to wrap all of this up is a coach, a cheerleader, someone who can help us move along, someone who can say you can when all you hear in your own head is I can't. Breaking these down a little bit more, right? When I say structured learning, what do I mean? I mean you have to have an LMS. And this LMS needs to have lessons and modules within them. And here's something where a lot of educators don't really tell you. These lessons cannot be hours and hours long, 2 to 3 minutes at a max. Can you believe that? And that's because our attention span as adults is between 2 to 2.5 minutes, thanks to our cell phones. Yeah, and I think for my kids, it's probably nanoseconds. And again, that what I call is check your understanding quizzes is what I provide my students, but some sort of a gate check so that your students are all catching up wherever they may be. And part of what I'll cover here in these check your understanding quizzes or assignments is the ability for us to do 2 things: provide critical thinking and reflective thinking, which is very important for us as educators, that our students walk away understanding how to do both. Thank you, MGM. Talking about reflective thinking. So reflective thinking addresses the so what instead of just the what. The so what instead of just the what. An example here in terms of reflective thinking is a biology teacher lectures for 15 minutes on pathogens. Then students take 5 minutes or so to write a short reflective piece capturing what they think they have learned, what questions, missed my spot, what questions they still have and why, perhaps their own experience with or knowledge about pathogens prior to the course, all really important questions, right? And so they write this down. So ideally what you want is the chance for students to stop and reflect and maybe even make a personal connection to the material. Right there, that one sentence, I think, or that one piece of it, that personal connection. How much better do we learn when we're able to understand things from a personal level? The next part of it is the study roadmap and accountability. Again, I'm going through this in a little bit more detail for those who are looking to implement these pillars in their own organizations. What has succeeded for 3T Institute is an actual study roadmap. I mean, no joke, I do give them an Excel sheet that has all of the lessons, how long each of these lessons are, by the second, and I assign it to them per minute, per 2 minutes. Crazy. But it works, they like it, and it's adults that like this. They're like, Mahjooba, hold me accountable, please. So some sort of a checkbox where they feel rewarded by progressing forward. Who likes being rewarded here, right? And sometimes it doesn't have to be a Starbucks card. It's that satisfaction of checking off a box. Is it just me? It could be just me with that problem. But I'll make boxes and I'll check them off just to say I'm done, right? So that in itself is an award for the individual. Group coaching. This is where it can get a little tricky here. Group coaching isn't really meant for you to spend your entire day with each one of your students teaching them. What they have done so far, what we have covered so far, just to give the picture, is they have an LMS. They get their lessons from the LMS. They have a community of students they can ask questions from. They've done their assignments, right? We know that. Then they have a place where they can come to, kind of open office hours, and say, hey, coach, I did that assignment. I have no idea what you want me to do. And I bet you anything other students have that same question. You maintain the same hours every day for 2 hours, maybe a week, or twice a week. And the students join and they ask their questions. Voila, done. So group coaching can be, a lot of, there are coaches out there who do this on a one-on-one basis. But for large student bodies, it's hard to do that. So you can have several coaching sessions going in parallel. Next. The student community is something that would need to be almost a separate platform, again, virtual. Everything I'm talking about here has nothing to do with in-person learning. It's absolutely virtual and can be applied to globally. And a student community, think of it as your own Facebook feed. Maybe it's away from Facebook, but there are some educational institutions that do have a Facebook group where students just come and talk. What can you provide as a platform or as a means for your shyest student to join that community and ask a question? Because that's my goal, to get my shyest student to ask one question, to interact or engage, to integrate into the community. So sometimes if they're not talking on the coaching calls, they're not writing you emails, maybe they're liking something on that student newsfeed. The synergy, everyone at 3T Institute always tells me, Mahjooba, you've built a community. People have celebrations of new jobs. They get their certifications. We celebrate it. Because as human nature, we like to come together and celebrate each other. So that's what this platform provides. Flow of ideas, a really good, positive environment. And during these coaching sessions, what we touch on is then critical thinking, right? And as part of critical thinking, this allows students to think about a subject, content, or problem in a structured setting while applying academic standards. So you are giving them some sort of a framework. The result is what you have is you have a student who raises vital questions and problems, formulating them clearly and precisely, gathers and assesses relevant information using abstract ideas, and they're thinking openly with you. As educators, that's what we want. So what you're doing with this blended learning is you are addressing reflective learning, not only the what, right, but the how, and also you're getting them to think outside of the box. And this is a continuation of the positive impact of critical thinking. So in short, what we have is critical thinking is self-directed, self-disciplined, self-monitored, and self-corrective thinking. How many of us go through an idea, and that idea by the time is finished looks completely different than what we started with? Imagine giving that platform to all of your students who come to you, or individuals that you're working with. So at 3T Institute, applying these approaches of blended learning, again, you have to look at what your environment, who you're working with, the age, the educational or knowledge barriers these individuals may have. But for us, what has happened is that we have had 90% of our students finish our online course. billions, maybe billions of dollars, I have actually forgotten the actual figure, millions or billions get spent on online training that individuals never even access or finish. So to have a percentage this high tells us that this coaching approach, the community approach, it works, it pushes individuals forward. We have engagements from our shyest students who come to these coaching calls and very nervously, Mahjooba, I'm so sorry. I don't know if someone else has asked this question, but what do I need to do for assignment 1? And you know what I do at that moment? I'm like, thank you so much for asking that question. That is an amazing question. I'm sure 3 other people want to ask it and they didn't. And so there's that encouragement of please ask, please share during these coaching sessions. And those first 2 bullets really lead to individuals passing their certification exams. All we really did was show them the yellow brick road, and they just walked on it. 60% say to me, Mahjooba, I now know how to apply this knowledge on my job. They actually find themselves engaging with their managers, with their teams, and feeling confident in what they have learned. So to me, as the CEO of 3T Institute, and what the mission and vision of my organization is being fulfilled by the progress of these students. And they can also be easily applied to your own organizations. The success is there, the statistics are there. Just requires a little bit of understanding of what works for your environment, and I know that you'll find success as well. Thank you.